Mia, look how funny you are here. Smiling, Sandra flipped through an old photo album that smelled of dust and glue. On the table in front of her sat a bowl of potato salad, and outside the window snow was falling quietly, covering the yard in a New Year's blanket. The tree in the corner blinked with colorful lights, and the smell of tangerines mixed with the aroma of roasted turkey. Mia, sitting next to her fiancé Alexander, forced a smile. New Year's at her parents' house was always the same: loud toasts, her mom's stories about the past, and these albums she brought out with military precision. But this time something felt different. Alexander, usually calm and composed, suddenly tensed, his fingers frozen on the edge of his champagne glass. His eyes were fixed on a photograph of 5-year-old Mia in a pink coat, standing in front of a brick wall. "What?" Mia whispered, leaning toward him so Sandra wouldn't hear. "Don't you see?" His voice was barely audible, but there was worry in it. "Look at the shadow. It doesn't match your body." Mia frowned, trying to understand what he meant. Alexander, a professional photographer, always noticed details: a wrong angle, bad lighting, and extra shadow. But now his eyes were too serious, almost afraid. "Alex, it's just an old picture," she said quietly, but he was already reaching for the album, turning the page. Another shot, Mia on a swing, the same smile, the same angle. And again, a shadow falling in the wrong direction, as if the sun was shining from two places at once. "Mia," he squeezed her hand under the table, "this isn't just a photo. They're doctored." Sandra, unaware of their whispers, kept going. "And here you're 3. Remember how you tried to feed the raccoon a carrot? It was so funny, we still laugh about it with your dad." Victor, sitting at the head of the table, nodded as he sipped his juice. His face was, as always, unreadable, but Mia noticed the quick glance he gave her, almost like checking. Mia nodded back to her mother, but her mind was spinning. She looked at her own face in the pictures, familiar yet foreign, like a mask. Alexander discreetly pulled 3 photos from the pile next to the album and slipped them into his jacket pocket. An hour later, claiming they were tired, they said their goodbyes. Sandra hugged Mia. Her hands were warm but too tight, like she was afraid to let go. Victor simply shook Alexander's hand, muttering, "See you." The freezing air bit at their cheeks outside, and Mia wrapped her scarf tighter. In the car, Alexander laid the photos out on the dashboard without a word. 3 shots, Mia in front of the brick wall, on the swing, by a fountain. The same facial expression in all of them, as if copied. Even the folds in her clothes were identical. "This is the same photo, Mia. Look, even the shadows on your cheeks are identical. They just pasted you into different backgrounds," he said, his voice shaking with restrained urgency. "And this?" He pulled out a 4th photo, a baby with blue eyes, swaddled in a white blanket. "That's not you. The face is different, the bone structure, the hair color." Mia felt her throat tighten. She stared at the photos, the world around her blurring. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the baby picture. The child's eyes were light, almost translucent, unlike her own, dark and nearly black. "They fabricated my life," she whispered, her voice distant. "But why?" Alexander didn't answer, but his hand rested firmly on her shoulder, warm and steady, like an anchor. At home in their small apartment on the outskirts of Portland, Mia sat on the couch surrounded by photographs. The light from the desk lamp fell across her face, deepening the shadows under her eyes. Alexander silently made tea and set a cup of chamomile in front of her, but she didn't touch it. The pictures lay on the table like evidence in a crime novel, each one screaming of lies. She tried to recall her childhood, school, first lessons, the smell of chalk and old textbooks. Her first teacher praising her neat handwriting. The yard where she played hopscotch with neighbor kids. But before the age of 5? Nothing. Just a vague sense of cold, strange voices, and harsh light, like in a hospital or an institution. She'd always thought it was normal that early childhood memories fade. But now that emptiness felt sinister. "Alex, I have nothing before 5, she said, staring at the floor. Not a single memory. It's like I didn't exist. Alexander sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder. His fingers were warm, but she was still shivering. Maybe it's just childhood memory. It happens to a lot of people, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. No, she shook her head. It's not just memory. It's like someone cut a piece out of my life. She stood and paced the room, her steps quick, almost nervous. The apartment was small and cozy, books on the shelves, photos from her and Alexander's trips, a potted ficus they called Fred. But now it all felt strange, like stage props. I've always felt out of place, she said, stopping at the window. They took care of me, sure. Bought me clothes, fed me, sent me to school. But it was like, by the book. Without warmth. Like I was a duty, not a daughter. Alexander stayed quiet, letting her speak. He'd always been a good listener, one of the reasons she loved him. But now his silence only deepened her unease. That night, when Alexander fell asleep, Mia couldn't. She sat in the kitchen, staring at the photos, when suddenly an image flared in her mind, a woman with dark eyes, smelling of citrus, holding her hand. Her voice was soft and warm, like a summer breeze. Then another woman, Sandra, younger, with a sharp smile, walked in and said, "I'm your new mom." Mia shivered, her palms pressed to the cold tile floor. She didn't remember how she got there, or how her fingers dialed the police. The dispatcher's voice was calm, businesslike. "Please state your name and address." "What happened?" I think I was kidnapped. When I was 5, Mia stammered, her voice shaking. "I just remembered. They're not my parents." The dispatcher paused for a second, then spoke gently. "Are you safe right now? Give me your address, we'll send someone." Alexander, woken by her voice, rushed into the kitchen. Seeing her on the floor, he crouched beside her, not touching, just staying close. When she hung up, he asked, "What did you remember?" "I don't know," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "But I'm not their daughter. I saw her, Alex. My real mom. She smelled like citrus." 2 days later, there was a knock at the door. Mia froze, her heart pounding. Alexander opened it, and there stood Sandra and Victor. Their faces were tense. Sandra held a bag of homemade cookies, as if that could soften what was coming. Her fingers fidgeted with the bag's handles, her eyes avoiding Mia's. "Mia, can we come in?" she asked, her voice too soft, almost pleading. Mia nodded, her hands trembling. Alexander stood beside her, arms crossed, his gaze cold, as if bracing for a fight. They sat on the couch, and Sandra spoke first. "The police called. They said you filed a report. Why didn't you come to us? And would you have told me the truth?" Mia shot back, her voice steadier than she expected. Sandra hesitated, clutching the bag even tighter. Victor, usually silent, finally spoke. His voice was low and tired. "You're not our biological daughter, Mia. That's the truth." Mia felt her heart tighten. She had expected this, but the words still cut like a knife. She searched their faces for something familiar, but all she saw was exhaustion and fear. "We wanted a child," Sandra continued, her voice trembling. "We went through so much loss, miscarriage after miscarriage, years of pain. The doctors told us we'd never have children of our own. We were desperate. And then we met your mother. She was young, alone, broke. Living in a tiny apartment in Detroit, barely scraping by. She couldn't raise you. We decided to take you. You stole me," Mia said coldly, her voice shaking with anger. "You didn't ask her. You just took me." "No," Victor shook his head. "We loved you from the very first day. We wanted to give you everything, a home, a family, a future. But we knew that if we told you the truth, you'd hate us. So we made those photos to make you feel like you belonged. You fabricated my life," Mia's voice cracked. "You turned me into a prop. Who is my real mother? Sandra dropped her gaze and said quietly, Elena Parker. Where is she? Mia clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. We don't know, Victor replied. Back then she lived in Detroit. We didn't keep in touch. It was too complicated. Mia studied their faces, searching for anything that could justify what they'd done. Sandra looked broken, her eyes red from crying. Victor stared at the floor, his hands resting on his knees like stone. Leave, Mia said quietly. They stood, left the bag of cookies on the table, and walked out without another word. The door shut behind them, and the silence in the apartment felt deafening. That night, Mia and Alexander sat at their laptops. A Facebook search for the name Elena Parker brought up dozens of results, but one profile from Detroit made Mia freeze. The woman in the picture, about 50, with dark hair pulled into a simple bun, was like looking into a mirror. Same face shape, same eyes, the same curve of her lips when she wasn't trying to smile. That's her, Mia whispered, her voice trembling. She typed a message, Hello, my name is Mia. I think I might be your daughter. They sent it and stared at the screen, as if willing it to reply instantly. The response came the next morning, Can we talk? Mia agreed, her hands shaking as she clicked the video call button. Elena's face appeared on the screen, and her eyes filled with tears instantly. She covered her mouth, as if afraid words would escape before she was ready. Melanie, she said, her voice shaking. Your name was Melanie. Mia froze. The name sparked no memories, but it felt right, like a key finally finding its lock. Are you my mother? She asked, afraid of the answer. Elena nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. I left you with a neighbor for just a couple of hours. I was filling out paperwork to move to another city, trying to start over. When I came back, you were gone. She said you'd disappeared. I looked everywhere, police, shelters, I put up flyers, but you were gone. Mia listened, her own tears streaming down her face. Alexander sat beside her, silently holding her hand, the only thing keeping her from falling apart. I didn't give you away, Elena went on, her voice breaking. I would never give you up. They stole you, Melanie. I've been looking for you for 25 years. A week later, they met in Detroit. Elena waited for Mia at the station, nervously fidgeting with the edge of her coat. When Mia stepped off the train, she recognized her instantly, not from the photos, but from the way her heart clenched. Elena hugged her like she might vanish again. They stood there for a long time, silent, until snow began to settle on their shoulders. Together, they filed a report with the police, attaching the old missing child flyers Elena had kept all these years in a worn folder. There was a picture of a little girl with dark braids and a red scarf, smiling at the camera. The investigation moved slowly, but the truth eventually surfaced. Sandra and Victor confessed to the abduction and falsifying documents. They told how they had found Elena in Detroit, learned about her struggles, and decided they could give the child a better life. The court took into account their motives, the desperation from years of infertility, the repeated losses, and their genuine love for Mia, and gave them a suspended sentence. They stayed in the city, but Mia couldn't bring herself to see them. Their love had been real, but built on lies, and that hurt the most. Elena decided to move to Portland, renting a small apartment nearby. She got a job at a local bakery, where the smell of fresh bread reminded her of her youth, of the days she baked rolls for little Melanie. Mia visited often. They talked about the past, about the lost years, about how to start over. Sometimes the conversations were light, about the weather, about recipes. Other times, they were heavy, filled with tears and unanswerable questions. Planning her wedding with Alexander became Mia's way of grounding herself. They chose a venue, debated over tablecloth colors, laughed at ridiculous cake ideas. Mia put Elena on the guest list, and when she received the invitation, Elena cried, holding it like a treasure. I never thought I'd live to see my little girl get married, she said. Mia looked at her, thinking how strange life could be. She had been stolen to be given a family, but the truth had returned her to another one. Sometimes she thought of Sandra and Victor, of their care, their attempts to make her theirs. She couldn't forgive them, but she didn't hate them either. Instead, she felt an emptiness slowly filling with new memories. With Elena. With Alexander. With herself.